Hi, I'm Arthur. You know what's cool? Living Saints. You know what's also cool? Chaos. So, why don't we mash them together and add something rotten to the mix and see what we get, right? Sounds fun? Maybe. So in general, Living Saints are kind of the culmination of several factors that we don't truly understand to this point. Usually the best way to sum them up is they are likely a latent psyker who through a bout of religious rapture becomes emboldened by their emotions and becomes kind of a living entity for, I would guess, the Astronomicon or just the idea of the Emperor. Or it could just be the Emperor being able to channel his will through another individual, which has been shown to be possible. So with that in mind, could Chaos do something similar? Yes and no. See, in order to become what is considered a saint, you usually have to be someone who's murdered, or you have to save someone with the power of the Emperor or what have you. And Chaos doesn't really lend itself to that very well, as Chaos is usually about breaking other people down so that you become stronger, rather than building other people up so that you can inspire people to worship the powers. It's grabbing power for the sake of powers. So becoming a holy man or woman, it's kind of against the grain for you to become a Chaos Saint, if that's even possible. So when someone becomes a living saint, they usually become a living weapon, which is usually useful in the setting of 40k, though that is kind of a dime a dozen. And if you want to be reductionist about it, you could say any major Chaos champion could be considered a Chaos Saint of some sort. But let's kind of narrow it down. A Chaos Saint is someone, probably a woman, because that just makes sense for the situation, because that's kind of what we know. We know Saint Celestine and so on and so forth. We have the ability to channel the powers of chaos as well as show reverence to them in a religious fervor. Do they have to be a passive psyker? Maybe, sometimes. But we do not have many that fit that bill, someone who could be considered a saint. But we do have one. A woman by the name of Lethe Fulmans, a child of the Emperor, a victim of circumstance, and someone who might prove the undoing of the homeworld of the Sisters of Battle and be a greater threat to the Imperium than we think. So I'm going to break down her story, give you an idea of who she is, and basically tell you her entire tragedy-stricken life. But before we do, let's go through the basic checklist here. If you haven't subscribed, do that. If you haven't comment, feel free to do so. I give you permission to yell at me if I get anything wrong. And like the video if you like the video. Use code BONEZONE for 10% off gamer subs, and let's boogie. Born on the world of Ophelia 7, Lethe's life was pretty shit from the outset, as even though she was a literal child, she was born well into the opening of the Great Rift, as that entire period of the Indomitus Crusade to reclaim worlds from demons took well over hundreds of years to finally conclude. Meaning the planet, even though it was Ophelia 7 and filled with the holiest of holies, was in the midst of a massive chaos incursion. A Lord of Change, going by the name of the Tyrant of Blue Flame, had weaseled in numerous cults and demons that were slowly eroding away reality on there, because, you know, it's Tzeentch. The planet was ravaged by the tyrant's ambition of corrupting everything that the Imperium had held sacred, because, you know, it's the home planet of the Sisters of Battle. Unfortunately, Lethe's father was branded a heretic and a traitor, as her entire city was burned to ash by the Sisters of Battle, as there was evidence of a chaos cult there. Lethe was maybe early pre-teens, maybe 10 at the time, and because of that, she was kind of taken away as a semi-innocent, as it is discussed. Her father was killed in front of her and burned for being a traitor, and we never truly find out if he was a traitor, only that he was in the city that there were. It is suspected that he might have been an actual true heretic, but we never know. But what we do know is Lethe was innocent in all this. She was never really a heretic. She was just some young girl who had never really had a chance to see the light of day, and it was during a time of strife that she was just born in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was captured by the Sisters of Battle, and for the next unknown amount of years, usually for quite some time, she was an adult by the time that we meet up with her, she was forced to work in the mines, day after day, with a penitent's mask and with the lash at her back from horrible wardens who would take a cruel delight in punishing anybody for any minor infraction. She was forced to break rocks and tunnel with many others who were branded as heretical enough to not allow freedom, but not heretical enough to kill on sight. These slaves were punished for speaking, even in leisure time, broken jaws, shattered bones, and death in as painful a way as possible, with the bodies not even being removed, simply allowing the rats to eat them until they were nothing but bones. But Lethe was racked with a heightened awareness. She knew to survive another day was the only goal that she needed to worry about, and she worked. She worked day in, day out, and through that, making sure that she ate the food that they gave her, however minuscule it was. She was wire thin, but corded with this sinuous muscle that made her quick, not physically strong, but quick. There was a single thought throughout all of this that was echoing through her mind, day in and day out, something that was pervasive enough that it eventually became the only thing that she thought about even after she secured her freedom, and that was simply why. Why was she here? She didn't do anything. She wasn't told why she was down here, only that it was her penance to do so. She didn't know what she was repenting for, and because of that, she grew increasingly more resentful towards the Imperium and especially the Sisters of Battle, as well as confused as to why the Emperor would allow something like this. Slowly growing more and more hateful with each day that passes by and with each crack of the whip on her back. And her being hateful and resentful wasn't even for anything petty, like her just being caught for her crimes, but for reasons of they burned her city down, they killed her father, and then forced her to work to atone for a crime that she either didn't commit or didn't know she committed. This all changed one day when he arrived. The death of saints. A Night Lord's warlord so powerful that he is more of a living myth than just a plain old space marine. He was coming to retrieve the skull of his long-dead sister, Saint Athanasia, and luck would have it that his destabilization of Ophelia 7 led to the numerous prison guards and wardens of the work camps being a bit, taken away. Their numbers were spread thin as they were being brought onto the war effort as conscripts. Lethe, seeing her opportunity, rather than being worked into an early grave and using the muscles and agility that she had worked up through fear and work, smashed one of the guards in the head with a rock, took his shock maul and ran. But this is when she learned the extent of what was happening to the planet as she got to the elevator leading out of the mine and found the surface. This is when she saw that the sky was raining fire and there was just endless war as far as the eye could see. She had a taste of freedom for just a brief moment, but it appears the guards weren't done with her yet, as one, the meanest one, the worst one, the one that in prior days had killed Lethe's only friend, who was an old woman of like 60, was there. This man was trying to drag her back into the dark. Stumbling over himself, he fell to the ground and only managed to grab a hold of her ankle. As Lethe could have left, at this moment, she could have simply clubbed him in the head and just started running. This is when you see the change in her, because she took the chance and shoved the shock maul directly into his mouth and turned it on until his entire head was fried. Taking his keys to unlock her shackles and breathing in air for the first time in a long time from lips that were not covered by a metal mask, this was her first real taste of both freedom and the boundless joy of unrestrained cruelty. Little did she know that she was being watched by someone who would change her life forever. The death of saints saw her. Saw this wiry thing, slave woman who, through pluck and determination, had escaped her fate, and he approached her. She did not shrink in his presence. She was afraid, yes, but she was not prepared to go back into servitude and become a slave or be tortured seconds after finally being free. So she was ready to die then and there, fighting for what she wanted. He simply looked at her and said, "You have hatred in your eyes." That was before he gave her an Astraman skinning knife, monomolecular edged, and took her in as his head cultist, someone to lead his human armies. If it stopped there, this would be probably one of the better villain origin stories I've ever read in the 40k setting. As Lethe, her struggles, her fears, her triumphs are all understandable. She was someone who was fucked by society and forced into this position. But the thing is, she continues from here and arrives at a place both horrid and beautiful and interesting. By the by, if you haven't watched my Death of Saints video, you should probably give that a go because it gives you a bit more context as to what I'm talking about. See, the Death of Saints, aka Khal Rakul, favors Lethe obviously because she reminds him of his old sister whom he had killed in a fit of rage centuries ago. But it's more than that. See, Lethe is also everything he needs to succeed right now, as she just for some reason kept falling into the proper place at the right time. She plays the part of a herald, she plays the part of a spy to keep track of the Night Lord's brothers who were planning on betraying him, as well as murdering a Saint Potentia, but we shall get there. Lethe was in a lot of the fighting, as her master, the Death of Saints, had reclaimed the skull of Athanasia, his sister, at some point throughout the book. But in a brief moment of oversight during the combat, the skull ended up being taken from him, leading to him almost going into a depressed, berserking state. Lethe was separated from the main group of cultists, and most likely because of divine providence, ended up in the underground catacombs of a very massive church in the area, which is where she encountered Saint Elena, or rather, the saint-to-be. See, this woman was a Saint Potentia, an individual whom, while fighting the Death of Saints' army, emitted a golden light that scared away both traitors and demons alike. And once she recaptured Saint Athanasia's skull, she was tasked with getting it back to the main base of operations for the sisters through the catacombs, as it was a direct route, and one person would be harder to track than others, and also she has the blessing of the Emperor on her side. But unfortunately, she did not find safety in the catacombs. She found Lethe. We only found out later truly how horrible things were for Saint Elena, as when Lethe returns with the skull, Khal Rakul is elated and rewards her by making her his Herald of Slaughter. See, this is kind of a corn cult, kind of a less violent World Eaters cult, which is kind of nice, I guess, but I mean, an entire warband of Uzas from the Night Lords trilogy doesn't really sound appealing to me. So, before we get too lost in the weeds here, what exactly is a Herald of Slaughter? Well, under the guise of simple prayer robes and carrying the reliquary that contained St. Athanasia's skull, Lethe went back to the main base of operations, pretending to be St. Elena. She arrived, and she was carrying a message. Everyone kind of immediately realized it wasn't St. Elena, it was some wiry pale girl, but she had the case that was supposed to have St. Athanasia's skull. Everybody was worried about Elena because she was beloved. She was a very pleasant soul to be around. So seeing news that there was a skull and that there was hope, everybody tended to perk up, from the sisters, the Militar. Hell, the Black Templars that were stationed there were delighted as well, as the Emperor was truly among his people. But that is when Lethe pulled back her hood to reveal the mark that was carved into her cheek. See, Khal Rakul has a messed up eye, so whenever he wants to brand a cultist with his favor, he carves a symbol directly under the eye that he has damaged. So they immediately recognize that as an Astraman rune and the mark of Khal Rakul, which is when Lethe opened up the reliquary to reveal the rotting head of Saint Elena filled with maggots and desecrated marks. She then told them the message that Khal Rakul wanted them to know, the reason why she was his herald, and that was simply, there is nothing you can do. Khal Rakul, the Death of Saints, is coming for you, and you are going to do nothing about it. That's appropriately Night Lordy. That's pretty Night Lordy. Yeah, I think that's pretty spooky. I'd be shook. I'd be pretty shook. Lethe was then, for her troubles, apprehended and then sent to prison by the sisters, and they were really, really mad about this, as you'd probably assume. The Abbess Sanctorum, Morven Val, who was on the planet at the time, really liked Elena, so as punishment, Morven Val ordered that she not be executed. Lethe was to be sent to prison, and then the second that it was possible, get her lobotomized and either put into an arcoflagellant or a penitent engine and then thrown directly at the Death of Saints main base. Which, you know what? I get that. That's kind of appropriately grimdark. But this leaves us with Lethe in a cage once again, screaming and smashing at the bonds that were holding her against the wall. Lethe was once again chained up and back in the darkness as a slave once more, begging to anyone who would listen, as she just didn't want to suffer anymore. She didn't care who would help her. She had trusted the word of the Emperor and Chaos alike. Although Chaos had treated her better, she had ended up the same, about to be lobotomized and turned into a walking monster of war. Hell, she was on the surgery table with a few other people getting ready to have parts of her brain removed when a sudden warp strike from warp talons breaking in from the 5th dimension saved her. Though saving her is kind of a misnomer, because if you don't know, warp talons are barely thinking animals that are kind of lost to their own obsession with slaughter and ripping things to pieces. She managed to free herself as the sedatives that they used on her wore off too early, and she managed to get out. There was a moment's hesitation when the warp talons saw the mark on her eye, but they did not give a single shit. They were gonna rip her to pieces and eat her. So she fled the surgery room, going down hallway after hallway, corridor after corridor, until she found stairs leading into the main crypt of this sanctorum. This crypt was endlessly black, and Lethe did not really have much in terms of light. The torch that she had scavenged along the way was dying, so she kind of snuffed the light out, hid in an alcove, and kind of just waited for death as she heard one way the warp talons were showing up that were going to obviously rip her to pieces, and then the other way she heard the clamoring of power armored boots, which if they were sisters of battle, she was going to die even worse. So she was just kind of getting ready for whatever happened when a voice spoke to her. It was known to be a very calming voice, the voice of a saint. See, a voice like this had appeared earlier in the book as the voice of Saint Athanasia, as anybody who held the skull of Athanasia could hear her voice from time to time. This voice told her that it was not her time and she needs to move. The wall next to her becoming soft and malleable like clay, she slipped through it, and almost magically the wall sealed up behind her. Whatever had just spoken to her just saved her life. Lethe now finds herself in the midst of various civilians, as somehow she is now in a small sanctuary for those who could not fight, which gives her time to rest as she prepares what to do next. And my dear viewer, what does she do next? Does she find the light of the Emperor and realize that she was saved by a living saint and realize the Emperor does indeed protect? Fuck no, she doubles down. Because on the eve of the final battle, Kal Rakul, the Death of Saints versus Morven Val, the Abbess Sanctorum of the Sisters of Battle, that is when Lethe appears next. Not to help Morven win or to help Rakul win, as she appears moments after the battle is more or less done, seeing that there had been a massive detonation of small missiles that had left her master, the Death of Saints, in a heap of broken bones and shattered armor. She saw him still clinging to life. He could sense her, probably through scent, and asked her to help him one last time. But in a moment of pity and disgust, she stabs him through the throat with the very knife he gave her before scampering off. What goes around comes around, eh? Months go by after this. Lethe disappears, but we eventually find her again under a fake identity as she found a way to slip into the menials that were working under the Administratum for cleanup on Ophelia 7. She was basically tasked with a bunch of other low-end workers with burning the bodies of the people that come in from the pyres, and you kind of wonder what her whole deal is right now. But you kind of figure that out pretty quickly, as one of the other workers that she was working with ends up getting basically bullied and beaten by a guard that was there for not working fast enough. Lethe, with very little hesitation, picks up a rock, and almost in a mirror of what she did to escape the prison back on Ophelia 7, she smashed the guard over the head, but this time not stopping, beating him over and over again until his brain was a pulp on the floor. She then looks at the other worker whom the guard was bullying and says, "Help me pick this up and throw it into the fire," with a bit of charisma and a bit of compassion, which the worker immediately goes, okay. As they pick the body up and throw it in, she tears off the uniform of the man, not to wear, but to do something that I find is very interesting, as she pulls out the old carving knife that she kept from Kal Rakul and carves the 8-pointed Star of Chaos into the body of the guard as it's going to be thrown into the fires. She then offers up a silent prayer to the pantheon of the 4 deities, and that is where we end with Lethe's story. Lethe is such a fun character. I really hope they bring her back for something, as in the end there was this kind of dark light flickering behind her, revealing that there was some kind of power to her that we might not have ever seen before. I know saying she's a dark saint is kind of a stretch, more like a super cult leader, but she has heard direct communication from either a chaos entity, the Emperor, the ghost of a saint, I don't know, but she has killed both a Chaos Lord and a Saint while still being a normal mortal and is still kind of thriving right now. She has the devil's luck and a knack for rallying people under her banner, which is absolutely fucking dangerous. But unfortunately, that is, again, where her story ends, as we know nothing about her after that. Will she bring another horror to Ophelia 7 at some point? I kind of hope so. But she may also just be a throwaway, and the horror is still there, ooh, type of plotline. Regardless, I hope you like this more narrative-focused video. I kind of did the same thing for the Death of Saints video, and I kind of wanted to do the same for the secondary video. I don't usually do these, but I really liked her as a character, and her slow descent into being something horrible and beautiful is very fun. Let me know what you think in the comments. Also, like and subscribe as it helps the channel. Special thanks to my channel members for supporting me, as with your support, I'm able to pay my editor to get this video done while I'm on vacation and actually taking a break for once, and still actually have time to breathe when I get back, as I'll likely be back by the time this video gets published. I know I say it a lot, but you all have genuinely changed my life, so thank you. And if you want to support me as well as gain access to additional early content, then become a channel member today. Thanks once again for watching, and before I go, yes, I got one more video to make about the Morven Vol book, and then I'm done. I promise. It's still a great book, but I'm kind of milking this kind of dry a little bit, so yeah. But also, please go read the book. It's really good, actually. Please.